Umaji or Roopji, who's going to take that? And please, let's keep it for 2 minutes, and please talk about the book and what it means for our audience.
Hi, I'll take the first question. Thank you very much for this opportunity and space. So our book, The Power, Sexuality and Gender Dynamics at Work, well, the name itself is quite clear about what the book is about. The book strives to bring to the table the struggles, doubts, experiences of organizational leaders that are often closeted, that often remain undisclosed. Organizations with all their good intent and their mission to promote gender diversity, to promote equity, inclusion, they develop policies, they develop SOPs, they implement team building processes, they build robust grievance redressal systems. But still, in situations of interpersonal conflicts and gender dynamics, leaders are often left feeling very accused, perplexed, hurt, and frustrated. So at Changemantras, the consultancy firm that Roop and I have co-founded, at Changemantras, we work as consultants and coaches with various organizational leaders. And from their lived experiences was born this book. The objective, basically our idea about writing the book was to use real life case studies to explore and to learn how to engage as leaders, as managers, with complex frictions between people with different gender and sexual identities in the organizations. And some of the most deep and honest sharing of vulnerabilities, when we were speaking to leaders and organizational senior management, and their sharing of vulnerabilities and convictions to find some common ground, to find dialogue spaces, that was the motivation for Roop and me to write this book. The book, in essence, looks at destroying the polarized perspectives of looking at diversity and inclusion, and to break the polarized lens of victim and the judge, that model, to break that model. The book uses a storytelling method from various multiple perspectives. We attempt to do that. So, for example, some of the case studies, the story is told from the lens of the victim as to how he or she experienced the situation in the organization. In another case study, there's a bystander who narrates the incident. In the next one, there's a whistleblower who actually describes the incidents and her stances of what she did. Or there is a case study on where the accused or the perpetrator in the organization, who's the accused, he shares his understanding of the why and the how of the situation. There is a story from the perspective of an ICC member, internal committee member, who talks about how the entire incident panned out. And in the last chapter of the book, we see this entire phenomenon of diversity and inclusion and equity in organizations through the eyes of a researcher. And there is in-depth data and evidence about the futility, of working and dealing with such complex issues in organizational spaces just through punishments and through using only legal frames. So our book is an attempt to help leaders and management to operate not only in the space as a judge or an arbitrator, but to find ways to become more inclusive, to become collective facilitators. And the book visualizes the urgent need to create dialogue and engagement to shape such spaces, which make our organizations creative, dynamic, inclusive, and safe. So it's an invitation. The book is actually an invitation to start dialoguing, start conversations, and thank you for this opportunity because we hope that this will be an invitation for many to start this dialoguing with us. So that's in the nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you, Umaji. Very interesting that you talk about utilizing multiple narratives. It's not one style of a case study method. You talked about multiple narratives or the multiple perspectives and viewpoints that you've used. So that's I think a great way to add more life and meaning to the book. My question to you is, after that you've written the book, how do you see this book being used by organizations? and how does it impact the world around you, the workplace, the organizations that you deal with? Do you see a tangible impact of the book? What's your sense of it?
So I think the first reaction that I've seen so far, especially from the reviews, has been very encouraging. My intent and Uma's intent of writing the book was breaking this triad of the victim, oppressor, and the judge. So every time, the only time we talk about wicket keepers, perhaps, is when he misses a catch. Similarly, gender and sexuality and power as subjects often rise in organizations when there is a crisis, when somebody has, filed a complaint or something like that. And yet, these are extremely potent. All of the diversity and inclusion frameworks that we have seen so far focus a lot more on demographic diversity, rather than looking at gender as it is held in the mind. Yeah. And that coding is carried by every individual and leadership in organizations. So some of the things that we've seen organizations doing right away is using the case studies as starting points for discussion. And it's become a chai pe charcha kind of thing, building communication programs around it, and really without judgment, getting to understand what do people think about it and what is their propensity. Because we have to understand in organizations, people really come from, especially global organizations, people come from diverse backgrounds, social, cultural, our understanding of what masculinities, what femininities, what roles of men and women are. And in the civilizational history of mankind, this is probably the first time that we are seeing such a complex play of factors. We challenge the whole notion of neutrality of genders, as many of us would try to believe that we are only a bunch of skills and competence. We're working in organizations and not really be seen as men and women, whereas our first engagements with each other, physically, psychologically, and emotionally, is identifying ourselves as men and women. So we look at organizations looking at the diversity and inclusion policies and really asking themselves, so what's the notion of gender diversity as it is held in the organization? We see the organization reframing and becoming far more accepting of the diversity rather than getting caught in what is good, what is bad, what is desirable, and what is undesirable. We've seen some organizations recognizing that threatening statements like zero tolerance actually being far more debilitating to organizations and looking at multiplicity, and therefore opening up areas of exploration that in terms of how do you and I understand gender and sexuality, and how does it play out in our relationship within organizations as colleagues or even in hierarchical relationships. So we've seen organizations using for OD, organizational development. We've seen them using it for social audits. We've seen it being used for POSH committee members and then getting them to re-clarify how do they see it. And more importantly, building a convergence between the gender and inclusion policies and the POSH policies, which are currently in most organizations seem to be very disconnected pieces.
Great. Thank you. I think we are now able to get a very wide perspective to the books and the topic. What are the organizations that are role models when it comes to diversity and
I'll quickly first take your first point, Amitji, which is you're talking about in the triangle of being, questions, and performance. Yeah, where does this book actually? And I think that's a very beautiful question, because I think we're all in the book what we talk about transitional patriarchy. 100 years ago, or for hundreds of years, we've had certain constantly evolving social structures, right? And even as we speak, there is how society molds itself is incremental from day to day. It doesn't go from point A to point B in a matter of a snap, right? And therefore, if we accept that we are all in phases of transitional patriarchy where some of the old order is still very vibrant and some new orders are constantly coming in, and not by somebody telling us, because nobody really has a perfect answer and a perfect solution to anything. So in the book also, with my editor, Saurabh kept on asking the same question, which is that perfect organization? I think one of the starting points is that there is no idea of the solution that will come from the outside. The book, the learning in the book that we encourage is introspective. So rather than looking at victims and oppressors and judges with an extrospective lens from the outside, right? The book encourages the reader to look at the psychological world of the person as a person holds it. So for instance, if you have a person coming from rural India working in the same organization where you have a Swedish person, and how do they actually engage, and how do you understand the both internal psychology of both people, and therefore what is happening between these two people. So it is the learning is introspective, it is not extrospective. Secondly, the other thing is about performance and doing. Rather than aspiring and looking at somebody else and having the perfect answer, we see organizations which are engaging with the questions at an exploratory level, far more being potent. So to accept, and what you're talking about, Amit, about being, that if I accept that we are all in varying stages of patriarchy, what is the current gender coding that we hold in the organization? How is that diverse? What are the polarizations? If we stop looking for a uniform answer and accept that there will be polarizations and there will be diversity, that's a great starting point. And the third point is that once that charcha then needs to get actualized, and the actualization will happen not only through a few select people in the DNI portfolio holder. It needs to be owned up by the management, the owners, and the people. So it needs to be an inclusive dialogue-based process. Sure. Saurabh, I haven't really found an organization that has reached the ultimate, the solution per se. But yes, there are some organizations who are engaging with the idea of dialoguing far more than the others. I'm happy to catch you offline and probably talk about those organizations.
Great. So to quickly conclude the session, I'm getting messages from the organizers to wrap up the session. And let me throw in a quick rapid fire, which will take 60 seconds. So Saurabh and Anupam, to you, I'll throw a word and I want your instant reaction. Success.
Tough to define.
Anupam Gupta, I was going to say success, Anupam Gupta.
I would say Saurabh Mukherjee.
So that's the mutual respect. Okay, to the other two authors, power.
Listening, celebrating, and growing together.
Courage.
So with that, on that note, I think time has run out. I hope this was a useful session. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be in the company of 4 great authors. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
My compliments to all panelists and Amit ji for doing wonderful moderating.
Yeah, thank you, Amit ji. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Chaturvedi sir. Thank you.